All right. Hi, Theater History 2 team. I'm finally doing my response presentation on Baile Strand, so I'm just going to hop right into it. So, the major themes that I found in On Baile Strand is this dispute between legacy and truth to oneself. And so we see the bulk of that theme in as the High King is begging Cuchulainn to be subservient to him in an attempt to preserve the kingdom for his children. But Cuchulainn is very defiant of this idea. He mostly uses the rhetoric that he doesn't have any children of himself. Why should he be concerned about the future? He should do as he pleases in the moment. And so the exploring that sort of like uh, link between value to the community and like responsibility, essentially. And another theme that I found was growing old. And not necessarily in like the coming of age way, but more of the growing out of your prime sort of way. And that is exemplary in the High King and Cuchulainn's dialogue with each other. You can distinctly see who's sort of um, even though they're displayed as peers, that they once shared the same warrior sort of lifestyle, that the High King is very much an established. He's grown old, and Cuchulainn is sort of like hanging on to the remnants of his youth and the remnants of his like warrior youth, and that is symbolized in his son, the young man. And so when Cuchulainn slays the young man in battle, he is essentially slaying his own youth, which is what he has also done when he swears his allegiance to the High King. And so, um, my analysis of the play as representative of Irish symbolism is that this play fits very well into the idea. And one of the traits that it has is the sort of distillation of characters by distilling them down to a mere title and also into symbolisms themselves. We can see the title example in the fool, the blind man, and the young man, and the sort of chorus of just kings and women. Um, and most exemplary in the young man, who, as I mentioned in the theme section, is a symbol of Cuchulainn's youth. And when he slaughters his son, he kills his own youth, essentially, which is very paradoxical of the situation that the High King brings to him, which is something that I very much liked about the piece. It also blends prose and poetry, which is another symbolism trait. More so in sort of the distinct difference between how the blind man and the fool speak, which is a strictly like layman's prose, and then at least in the script we read, but then the High King and Cuchulainn and the young man speak in this sort of like elevated poetry speech. So there's that class distinction, but also it satisfies uh, uh, the requirement for a symbolist play. And in my personal response to this, I quite liked the play. There's something very rewarding about even going into the play knowing that it's a symbolist play. Just being able to pick out little details and it's like, oh, I think I know what this means. Oh, I think I know what this means. And so when the young man appears, I was already sort of looking. I was already looking for what he meant, what he was supposed to represent. But because of the previous dialogue with the High King and Cuchulainn, it's it's a pretty easy distinction to or easy end to come to, but still rewarding nonetheless. Um, and I think that there's something very that this play opens a lot for creativity, especially within my field. Costuming, just reading it, I was thinking about what sort of fun costume detail pieces could be done when looking at side by side at Cuchulainn and the young man, especially sort of. I liked the idea of having them sort of mirror each other in a way. Maybe similarities in how they wore certain accessories, or um, their choice in colors, or even just anything really, to sort of show that there's a relationship there, but also allow for the disconnect to remain. Ba, ba, ba. And also, I feel like this would be a good play to perform today because socially, I think there's always room for rhetoric on growing old and coming to terms with that. And though it doesn't have to be in such a violent or paradoxical way, but there's always going to be room for giving up what one wants to be doing for what is branded as the higher good. And I feel like if we take that away from the literal sense of growing old and just essentially um, looking at it as Kukalin giving up doing what he loves, which is being a warrior and being more subservient, I think it can easily translate to essentially giving up your passion or giving up your zeal, what gives you zeal for life, and doing something that's more in line with what the norm wants you to be. And I think that there's always room for pieces that say things like that. So, yeah, that's my presentation. Hope you enjoyed on Baile Strand as much as I did. I will see you guys around. Bye.